because either you're supposed to be in Victoria Falls or you're supposed to be out at the National Cleanup Day. And I've just been told today that, you know, we would really need to justify ourselves why we're here. So warm welcome and welcome to the World Bank. Before I start, and this is to, just in case you think you are in the wrong room, to the launch of the Country Climate and Development Report, as well as the, how do you call this one now? It's very, Country Private Sector Diagnostics. These are really difficult acronyms, but welcome. Before I start and before we go into the program, I have the country manager, Eneida Fernandez, who would like to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadzi. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here. I'm very, very happy to see everyone here at the World Bank office. The team really did a big effort to host you all here, and we hope this will be just the first time that we're hosting you here. I think the bank for the past few years, we've done so much impressive work with the government and knowledge work and technical assistance, and a lot of times we don't share this knowledge with everyone. So I hope this is just the first one, but that we will be using this room much more often to have all of you with us here to discuss Zimbabwe, discuss the development of Zimbabwe. So really a big thanks to all of you that are here, but also to the team that pulled this together. And Fadzi, thank you for moderating the event.
Thank you very much, Eneida Fernandez, our country manager for the World Bank. In Zimbabwe, we always try to do protocol. I'm trying to shorten it because we want to get to what we want to do today. But let me quickly recognize that we do have senior government officials here, PSs represented from different ministries. I see quite a few. I would like to just quickly recognize so that you know who's in the room. We have the PS Labor, Social Welfare. We have the Deputy Reserve Bank Governor. I will not go to the high offices yet because they will be stated. And then we do have our development partners in terms of from our ambassadors. I would like to recognize the ambassadors who are here present. Welcome. I would like to recognize also the heads of development agencies that are here. Some of them are going to be our panelists. So in case I've missed you out, I'll be calling you out as we go along. But I would also like to recognize the majority of the people who are here, who are coming from different sectors, private sector, the government, civil society, all walks of life. So thank you very much, and I hope that we do have a very engaging morning. So to start off with, I think we do have a very full program. I would like to bring to the important seats just in case. Oh, yes, sorry. From the bank, we have, otherwise I would have been fired. From the bank, we do have very important representation. We do have our country director who sits in Tanzania, Nathan Belete. He's here with us. Today he has been a regular visitor in the last few months just to show his commitment with Zimbabwe. And of course, we have been told that in the last, I don't know how many years, we've not had a vice president for Africa coming to visit us. So this is really, really a great time for this office in the bank and also for the government of Zimbabwe. So I think I've acknowledged everyone, and I would like to start off with our first session. So for the first session, those seats are not just for display. I would like to invite those that are in the first session. So Madam Victoria Kwakwa, if we could ask you to come up to the stage. Thank you very much. And then you can sit where you feel comfortable. And then Deputy Minister Honorable Mnangagwa, can I also invite you to come up? We are still missing somebody, who is the Permanent Secretary for Environment. He will also join us at some point. I don't know, you want to sit away from each other? That's fine. Okay, that looks good. So to start off the program, I would like to invite you, Victoria. As I've said, she's our Vice President. I'm not going to read her bio because we're going to spend a lot of time here. But I would like to invite you, Victoria, to say a few words to us in terms of these reports and anything else that you would like to say to the audience. So let me invite you to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatsi. Deputy Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, the Honorable David Manangagwa. Did I say it right? Okay, great. Thank you. Government officials here present, members of the diplomatic community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Yeah, that's more like it. Look, let me say how delighted I am to be here with all of you today. This is my first visit to Zimbabwe, and I'm just loving this place. So thank you so much. Deputy Minister, I want to thank you for the warm hospitality already, the warm reception at the airport, and I felt very welcomed and very much welcomed here. So thank you so much, and I hope this will be the first of many other visits to Zimbabwe. Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here to also introduce two knowledge products that the World Bank Group has prepared on Zimbabwe in the last few months. The first is the Country Climate and Development Report for Zimbabwe, what we call the CCDR. And Ida referred to the number of acronyms we have. Well, this is one. And this report highlights the impact of climate change on Zimbabwe and also sets out a series of climate investments that could set the country on a more resilient and greener development path. I think every time we think about climate, we think, oh God, all the challenges. And this report recognizes the challenges, but it also recognizes the opportunities. And there are real opportunities through policy, through investments for Zimbabwe to get on a path of greener and more resilient growth, to seize the opportunities. The second report is a country private sector diagnostic, the CPSD. And this provides an in-depth economic analysis to identify opportunities for the private sector to maximize development impact. What I've been told is that the private sector here in Zimbabwe is very resilient and can really be a force for driving double-digit growth. Since I've been here, this is what I'm talking about. This is what Zimbabwe needs to grow at double-digit levels, to meet its objective of becoming an upper middle-income country by 2030? Yes. And so what more can be done to really help seize this opportunity of this entrepreneurial private sector? This is what the second report talks about. So these reports, we do them across the globe in all our countries that we work in. But I think that for Zimbabwe, we're doing these reports at a very critical juncture. I think it's a good time to be discussing these reports because they offer key new insights and provide a strong foundation for our technical support and policy dialogue to the government of Zimbabwe going forward. For the reason for this is that both reports importantly inform the government's Vision 2030 objective, as I've just said, to become an upper middle income country by 2030. To realize this ambitious target, there's need to take a medium-term perspective and consider both the potential opportunities and reflect on how to avoid the pitfalls, to develop a bold action plan for reform. Let me reflect on both reports in turn. First, both reports highlight the country's significant growth potential. Significant growth potential. Our private sector diagnostic emphasizes that Zimbabwe has high productivity across several economic sectors. And with a more conducive environment, these sectors could show rapid growth. Our climate change report, in turn, reflects on the significant opportunities that could arise for Zimbabwe by tapping into global demand for energy transition minerals and by building the associated value chains. The potential is very large. Second, both reports also note that Zimbabwe has historically been held back by several pitfalls. Key challenges on macroeconomic instability, the business environment, and constrained access to finance. All of this has resulted in limited structural transformation and a continued reliance on an agricultural sector that is very vulnerable to climate shocks. Together, the climate action set out in the CCDR and the policy reforms to strengthen the enabling environment for private sector set out in the CPSD are critical to stimulating high growth and facilitating the economic transformation needed to realize Vision 2030. As such, we at the World Bank Group, we view the CCDR and the CPSD as key analytic inputs to strengthen our partnership with the government and the private sector, and of course, civil society in Zimbabwe. To move forward, both reports call for a renewed partnership between the public and the private sector that can be facilitated and co-financed by international partners. It is also why the CCDR and the CPSD will inform the finalization and the implementation of the upcoming Bank's Country Engagement Note, which officially shapes the strategic direction of our engagement with the government and people of Zimbabwe. And finally, I want to extend our gratitude to colleagues from the government of Zimbabwe for the excellent collaboration through invaluable inputs and comments on these reports. So thank you all again for joining this launch today, and we hope that you will find these analytic pieces of good value in your work. I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Here. You can have this back.
Sometimes technology fails you. It's working now. So I'll leave this for the minister. So while I'm standing next to you, Deputy Minister, may I please invite you also to say your remarks. Let me just say that these reports would not have been possible with the support from the government, and key to that were various ministries, including, of course, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Environment. I'm still trying to locate them. They'll be in the room. And yes, so please proceed, Minister. Minister, thank you.
Thank you for that. I know you started by giving us a penalty for not being where we're supposed to be, but I think we're in the right place. This is where we're supposed to be. You mentioned that government has too many protocols, and unfortunately I am a government official. I have to go through the protocols just to make sure that everybody is acknowledged. And I will start with my co-panelist. Welcome, Madam VP. We are extremely excited about your presence here. I'm informed this is the first high-level visit in over 2 decades. So this is something that we celebrate as Zimbabwe in our re-engagement agenda. And thank you for giving us a solid team. Nathan and Anade are very energetic, and we see the passion and the commitment. So we welcome you. When we met in the hallway, Dr. Kwaka was mentioning how she loves Zimbabwe and the climate, and you know, we received that, we're happy, but I told her that as Zimbabweans, we're actually not happy with the weather right now because it's supposed to be raining. Nonetheless, it speaks to why we're here. Climate change is real. We are experiencing it firsthand. I think our neighbors just declared the El Nino drought a national emergency. That just shows how much it's affecting the region. I'd also like to acknowledge our government officials in the room. I notice a few PEMSECs, environment, social welfare, industry. We also have our senior advisor. I think he'll be on the panel later, Prof. Chakravarti. And if I've left anybody out, it's because I'm trying to cut the protocols. I've been given just a few minutes. So let me start by expressing my pleasure in launching these 2 reports. The first one being the Country Climate and Development Report for Zimbabwe, the CCDR, and the Country Private Sector Diagnostic for Zimbabwe, CPSD. Forgive me if I get tongue-tied along the way. I'm sure you. I'd like to thank the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation for working with the government of Zimbabwe on these 2 reports. I think the long-term view on climate impacts provided by the CCDR and the analysis of Zimbabwe's comparative advantages in the CPSD provide useful insights that will help inform our national policy direction. I'll start on reflecting on the climate report by enumerating some of the key commitments Zimbabwe has made to addressing climate change. Zimbabwe's revised nationally determined contribution aims to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. You'll find that everything in our strategies are aligned to 2030, which is our benchmark in achieving an upper middle income economy. The government is also finalizing a national adaptation plan. Now, the costs of climate action in Zimbabwe are estimated at 10.3 billion for adaptation and 4.8 billion for mitigation. Now, given Zimbabwe is a small net emitting country, highly vulnerable to climate change, the NDC is conditional on appropriate international support, albeit we've made some investments that are included in our national development strategy. Within the existing fiscal constraints we face, the no regrets and low cost actions set out in the CCDR are useful as a useful starting point for government and its developmental partners. They propose focusing public expenditure on public goods that will catalyze private sector investments, such as improving grid efficiency to promote private sector investment in renewable energy and on-grid storage. We'll be using our research and extension system to generate and promote the adoption of thoroughly tested conservation agriculture technologies. I'll explain what Pumvudza is to you later on. I'm trying to compress my remarks, but I think it's a concept that you need to take on to other African nations. We'll also be developing a unified beneficiary registration system to improve targeting of social protection payments and enable us to expand payments during climate shocks. Now, these no regrets and low cost actions will help us to both address existing climate variability and will build resilience in the medium term. In turn, this will facilitate our transition to an upper middle income growth path. Now, reflecting on the Country Private Sector Dialogue Report, the CPSD, let me highlight that the report underscores 2 key messages that are critical for Zimbabwe's future development trajectory. For one, that many of our industries remain competitive and productive and could become drivers of growth in the short term, as you mentioned in your earlier remarks. And two, that establishing macroeconomic stability is the major challenge we need to address in order to create a more enabling environment for the private sector. I would like to decouple the macroeconomic stability from our currency instability. I think the latter is probably what is strangling us more and threatening the former. That is the biggest challenge that we are addressing. And we're already making significant progress towards this goal. For several years, the Ministry of Finance has embarked on a sustained adjustment path that has allowed the fiscal deficit to be sharply reduced. We have kept fiscal deficits low at 1.6%. That was in 2022, down from 2% in the prior year, despite the rising spending pressures. And the full year fiscal deficit for 2023 is estimated to be under 3%. The government of Zimbabwe has also taken over contingent liabilities of 3.5 billion from compensation for a 2019 decision to impose an exchange rate restrictions that blocked external payments for foreign suppliers. This was with the RBZ. These are what we're terming the blocked funds. And we've promised to compensate, former farm owners. It's part of our structured dialogue platform, which is going quite well, I would say. So on this way, we are on path towards reducing all quasi-fiscal operations. The RBZ's monetary policy has been significantly tightened. Since June 2023, the RBZ has been proactive in tightening monetary policy, has increased reserve requirements for the banking sector, and has raised bank policy lending rates. Furthermore, reserve money growth was curbed by issuing non-negotiable certificates of deposits, the NNCDs, and gold-backed digital tokens to absorb excess Zimbabwean dollars. These are gold-backed digital tokens, what we're terming Zimbabwe Gold, ZIG, and they've been quite a hit in the market. The government has also extended the use of US dollars as of legal tender until 2030. There was an SI that came out to the future. So it reduces the policy uncertainty with regard as to the use of the multi-currency. So we'll continue on this path in collaboration with support from yourselves and the IMF, and we're confident that it will bring microeconomic stabilization that our private sector needs. The report talks extensively about sectors in which Zimbabwe has a manifest and latent comparative advantage, notably certain agriculture and agribusiness value chains, the mining and the tourism industry. We agree that these value chains have enormous growth potential in the short term and are working hard to bring about the necessary enabling environment, including improvements in the energy and the transport sectors, the digital economy, and the business environment. So with our progress with both macroeconomic stabilization and our efforts to address structural challenges on the sectoral value chains, we're confident in the economic future of our country. Madam VP, I'd like to thank you for your support in preparing these important reports. And I think we will go a long way, as I'd mentioned before, where we were talking at each other, now we're talking to each other, which is an important ingredient for success. So I'd like to thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Once again, a round of applause for Victoria and the Deputy Minister. So with that, I think you've laid the ground, and we would like to dig our teeth into what the reports have to offer. I think you've done the presentations for these guys, but what I would like to do now is to invite you to sit back so that you can have the screens in front of you. And I will invite the team made up of three that have worked on this report. So we have Dominic, who will talk to the CCDR. We have Sophie, who will talk to the CPSD together with Volker. They will introduce themselves, because if I do introduce them, I'll take time. So.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dominic Duval. I'm a senior economist, and I was one of the authors of this report, and I'm going to take you through this exercise, which is really a data-driven exercise in futurology. that combines data from natural science and economics. So what we've done is we look at a series of climate scenarios. And we also look at two futures, economic futures of Zimbabwe. The climate scenarios that we look at are a Paris-aligned scenario, a 4-degree world scenario, but we also need to understand the potential extremes within Zimbabwe. And the thing about climate science is there's a lot of uncertainty in it. And so there are many different models, very many different takes, if you like, from all of the climate research institutes around the world on what climate might look like in 2050 up to 2100. So what we did is we took a cluster of wet-warm scenarios and a cluster of dry-hot scenarios. And we used those as sort of bookends, if you like, to understand what the potential range of impacts on Zimbabwe might be. Now, the certainty is that temperatures will increase, and that's the top graph. Temperatures will increase under all of the climate scenarios because we are already working well, we're already well on the way to a 1.5 degree world, and it looks like we'll go past that. On the economic side, we looked at these two economic futures, which we call the business as usual future, which is literally projecting the past into the future. So that goes for the structure of the economy, but it also looked at the growth rate. Then we look at an aspirational scenario. This is a double-digit growth scenario, right? This is the upper middle income scenario. This is what is in line with Vision 2030. And we look at the climate shocks, we transmit them through those different economies in order to understand what's going on. So that's where this uncertainty on the right-hand side with precipitation is so important. So we know that temperatures are going to go up, but with precipitation, it's much less clear. And there's an enormous amount of variability. So the scenarios, this is the dry-hot, this is the dry-hot, this is the wet-warm. But you see in the gray shaded areas a lot of uncertainty. So it doesn't mean that the bold lines, if you like, are what we will experience year on year. In fact, we'll experience a lot more variability than that. So here are the results. If we take the means for the Paris-aligned world and the 4-degree world, then the damages don't look too bad, but they're averaging out a lot of things. They're averaging out all of the global, the GCMs, the global circulation models. And so this is precisely why we wanted to look at the wet-warm and the combined hot-dry scenarios. And if you like, the bad news is that under the hot-dry scenarios, the damages could be up to 5% of GDP by 2050. But we need to look underneath those damages because we need to understand the channels of impact. And here, this is the hot-dry scenario. And you see that all of the damages are negative. And what the adaptation requirements are really to reduce the economy-wide labor heat stress. And this is a channel which is simply, particularly if you work out of doors, if you work in agriculture or in artisanal mining, the fact that temperatures will go up will cause more labor heat stress and reduce your productivity. There'll also be damages that we need to prevent through adaptation to crop and livestock revenues. There'll be a need to mix hydropower with other renewable energies because there's a negative shock to hydropower output. And then we need to figure out ways to adapt to reduce impacts on roads and managing inland flooding. So those were the hot-dry scenarios. If we move to the wet-warm scenario, then there's still labor heat stress, but it's slightly less. There's still a need to reduce the impact on roads and bridges. There's still a need to impact inland flooding. In fact, it's slightly bigger. And soil erosion actually increases, of course. under this scenario. And then there are also greater labour health shocks that need to be addressed, and there's still a livestock revenue shock, even in this wet warm. But there is some upside. And the upside comes here in these positive blocks, which is to crop revenue gains and hydropower output. So that is these bookends, if you like. So under a hot, dry scenario, things look pretty negative and could be up to a 5% hit on GDP. The GDP hit is lower under the wet, warm scenarios, but you see one of the reasons it looks so flat in the original graphs is because there's both positive and negative things going on. So thinking ahead, then, really the weather forecast for the next 25 years is very likely more droughts, even using these average models, and continued very heavy 5-day cumulative precipitation events that come over from the Mozambican Channel. Now, that's very much about the adaptation story. The mitigation story in Zimbabwe is very interesting because, of course, Zimbabwe is a low net emitter. So it's really about opportunity. The whole world is trying to transition to renewable energies and decarbonize. And this is where the opportunity for Zimbabwe comes. If you like, it's an opportunity outside Zimbabwe, which is the mitigation story. And so between the mitigation story and the adaptation story, we have these 3 areas of multi-sectoral climate action that are proposed in the report. The first is the greening of the mining industry and using the mining industry to support low emissions, resilient infrastructure. That's the first. So it's a multi-sector thing. We'll drill into it a bit more in a minute. The second one is supporting conservation agriculture, landscape restoration, food and water security. And the third one is about protecting and growing human capital. And we're very happy to see you here, Piers. So on the mining side, what's proposed in the report is that we really want to use the mining, or we think there's a real opportunity to use the mining sector as an anchor investor for renewable energy and reviving, for example, rail services to transport mining product. So because there's this global energy transition and there'll need to be resiliency in supply chains to supply the world with these minerals, this opportunity arises. But in order to really retain value or get the value retention in minerals here in Zimbabwe, there would need to be a 6-fold increase in generation capacity, electricity generation capacity. That's our estimate, and we did detailed analytics on that. Now, that is a very, very large increase. So this is where we need to really think about using the mining sector as a way to bring in renewable power, not just to capture it, but also to provide it to local communities and local towns. And then on the infrastructure side, there are ways that we can get the mining industry to help with rehabilitating railways, but also this will need to be done through promoting transparent and competitive allocation of concessions and ensuring thank you very much. Thank you. And competitive tenure and sanctity of contract. Moving on to agriculture. Just highlighting one very important thing here. Which is that, firstly, the hits that we saw to global agriculture at GDP level don't reflect the output hits, which are much bigger on the dry hot side. And so we need to remember that. But most importantly, maize. Now, in agriculture, we really have to then think, if we're going to have up to 30% hits on maize, particularly in some of these catchments that are lower in altitude, then we really have to think about how we innovate, how we irrigate, and how we mechanize to adapt to climate change. Moving on to safety nets then, we really need to think about moving from emergency response to a national safety net program that will reduce poverty and build climate resilience. And in order to do that, the best opportunity here is really to work with the harmonized social cash transfer mechanism. Currently, it covers a rather small percentage of the population, but if we could get this universal beneficiary registration system, then we could really scale it up. And not only that, but we could also make it shock responsive and even build resilience through that. So, in summary, what we're saying is that Zimbabwe's climate and development priorities are to link the opportunity to supply minerals to the global energy transition and rebuild low emissions resilient infrastructure. We also contend that following the fast-track land reform, there's a real opportunity to get a realignment of knowledge, water, finance to boost food security and export markets. And then thirdly, this area to protect insecure households from the vagaries of climate change, and also to work on the educational pathways for a high-tech economy and that will support mineral value addition and precision agriculture. So the final bit here is this idea that we need to start with low-cost, no-regrets actions, right? We're fiscally constrained now, but we can use those to build resilience and transition to a higher growth path. And then we can use the additional resources that come when we've transitioned to that higher growth path to build low-carbon resilient economy. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Dominique, you are a very hard act to follow. I do my best. Welcome again. My name is Sofia Muradana. I'm Senior Private Sector Specialist with the bank. And today we will talk a little bit about the Country Private Sector Diagnostic, or CPSD. As you may have guessed by now, we love our acronyms. It's a running joke. So let me unpack this one for you. So what is CPSD, right? CPSD is a joint analytical report by World Bank and International Finance Corporation that assesses opportunities for and constraints to private sector-led economic growth. Each CPSD, including this one, includes very detailed assessment of the current state of the private sector, identifies high growth potential, value chains and economic sectors, evaluate binding constraints, as well as provide specific recommendations on policy and reform agenda that can drive solutions to development challenges of the country. And I think when we came here a year ago almost, the main question we wanted to kind of answer for Zimbabwe is how we can unlock private sector potential in the country to facilitate economic transformation. And I should say on behalf of the whole team, we were truly, truly impressed and inspired by the private partners and companies that we met, and realization of the strong resilience in face of multiple challenges over past decades, and presence of strong potential that can be unlocked in a very near-term future. And I think this is what distinguishes Zimbabwe from many other countries on the continent, that should we address some underlying constraints, the private sector potential can be unlocked very, very fast. What is the source of this resilience or key strengths, right? When we look at this economic performance of several sectors, they demonstrate amazing competitiveness that is regionally or globally relevant. And we are talking about agribusiness and agriculture value chains, mining, tourism, and others. I think another important factor is relatively strong human capital. We all know that well-educated labor force and strong entrepreneurial culture is a precondition for any thriving private sector, and Zimbabwe enjoys that. Another important strength is abundant natural and mineral resources, and most of them are still untapped. If we are talking, for example, energy transition minerals, lithium, this is still one of the untapped opportunities that can drive growth and provide opportunity to reach the country's ambitions to become upper middle economy by 2030. And last but not least, of course, the recent efforts by the government to strengthen macroeconomic stability, to make Zimbabwe more conducive for private investments and re-engage with the international partners are critical factors. And just to illustrate what we mean by that, look at the productivity of these two value chains in cotton and poultry. And in comparison with the countries that are aspirational and structural peers for Zimbabwe, both value chains perform amazingly well. And to provide you a little bit more details on private sector opportunities, binding constraints, and key priority reforms, I want to invite my IFC co-lead, Volker, to elaborate more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophia. I'm Volker Treichel. I'm the IFC Regional Principal Economist for Africa. So as Sophia said, we are now looking in more detail at what the private sector opportunities are. So first of all, like, how did we actually look at those sectors, right? What are the criteria that we used in order to identify where the greatest opportunities are, right? And there are 5 criteria. One is the revealed comparative advantage, which shows a country's competitiveness. The second is global demand prospects, because we want to have sectors that have strong potential on the global markets. Third is the employment elasticity. We want sectors that create jobs. The fourth is the proposal prospects for value addition, right? Because the sectors need to be stepping stones for value addition down the line. And the last one is private sector involvement, right? Sectors in which the private sector is already active. And based on this, we have this list. It's not, I mean, there are other sectors that are also of interest, but these seem to be the ones that are by far the most promising ones. Cotton, sugarcane, maize and wheat, livestock, horticulture, and dairy in the agriculture agribusiness area, tourism and mining, especially lithium. So if we talk a little bit more about each of these sectors, I mean, the importance of agriculture is self-evident in Zimbabwe, right? 70% of the population lives off of it. It contributes 40% of national earnings. And the sectors that we have seen, right, are also able to be very important sources of export-led growth, right? If you look, for example, poultry could feed, you know, a large part here of the sub-region. The same is true for horticulture. Blueberries are a very important factor in the Netherlands, for example, because Zimbabwe is already complying with the organic farming certificates. It's just as one of the few examples. It's much more in detail in the report itself. Then you have the mining industry, where we have a chapter in the report on that. There are many deposits here of mining. Perhaps the one that is of most relevance in the short term is lithium. Right? We all know the importance of lithium down the line, right, for battery production. Zimbabwe All right, this is better. All right, so lithium is 70% here is a large platinum deposits, high-grade chrome ores, and 11 million tons of lithium. And this is something, again, that also has the potential to improve productivity for artisanal mines, right? There are lots of artisanal miners. If they are finding better situation, that will also be a very major source of poverty reduction, like agriculture. Coming to tourism, right now it's mostly Victoria Falls. There are many other areas in Zimbabwe that have a huge potential. Look at the Eastern Highlands, right? Look at other parts. The potential has not even really been scratched, in this area. And there are, again, many things that can be done in the short term. Now, what are the problems that are holding this back? where is it here? Okay, so we have identified 6 gaps using what we call the traffic light system. Traffic light system compares Zimbabwe's performance in a certain indicator with those of aspirational peers. We have selected a number of aspirational peers and compared Zimbabwe's performance across those sectors. And that gives us 6 major gaps. By far the most important one is macroeconomic instability, right? It's the high inflation rate. And there is a lot of discussion in the report where this is coming from and how it could possibly be addressed. Then we have access to finance, business environment where, a lot of work needs to be done. And then we have energy and transport where the gaps are not as large relative to the aspirational peers as in other areas, but they are still relatively important. And then we have the digital connectivity where there are also some problems here. The report has a lot of detailed recommendations on this. I don't want to go into this now. Let me just speak about the macroeconomic side, because that is really, in the short term, by far the most important issue. Zimbabwe has a very high inflation rate. It has had a very high inflation rate for a very long time. There are chronic shortages of foreign exchange. There's foreign exchange variability, volatility, and that in every conversation we've had with the private sector, that turns out to be by far the most important issue. And the areas that really are important, and the Deputy Minister spoke about it already, it's the issue of the quasi-fiscal operations, right? The quasi-fiscal operations by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe that are, in the process of being reduced, right? We have then the issue of the export surrender requirements that are a very important tax for the private sector, and that can be scaled down, and that would then be a greater incentive also for companies to formalize. Zimbabwe has a lot of informality. And, lastly, coming to a market-based exchange rate where the gap between the official and the parallel market rate is declining. Now, I don't want to go into all the various recommendations in the energy, transport, access to finance. They are all in the report. You can read that. We have put out the report on this. This is the QR code. So again, it has been a great pleasure for the team to work on this report in Zimbabwe. It's a great country, and it has currently, a new momentum for reform. I think that is very exciting to see, and we hope that the reports will help to make this momentum a reality. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much to the authors of the 2 reports, but also would like to acknowledge the people that they worked with, the teams that they worked with, because there were actually quite a lot of inputs, more than just the people that you've seen in front. So thank you so much. Another round of applause. Yes. So now this was the team. What we would like to do now is to hear from the rest of us what we think about these reports and how our perceptions, or maybe in terms of, digging a bit deeper in terms of the recommendations, in terms of what is being put forward, what we think. And at this point, I would like to invite our panelists back now to the red chairs. So let me, as I bring them up, I'm just going to do some short bios so that you know who is, what authority they have to be speaking about these issues. So Jo Abbott. Jo Abbott is Development Director and Deputy Ambassador at the British Embassy in Harare. She leads the development portfolio for the UK in Zimbabwe. She has over 30 years experience in academia and not-for-profit and international development and diplomacy. And this and this and this and this and this. So welcome, Jo. Our second panelist who has just walked to the podium is Bongani Zamchia. Bongai Zamchia. He read law at the university and has been involved in business in Zimbabwe for over 20 years. I just know him for the restaurant. long bio. The next panelist is none but Professor Chakravarti. Is he in the room? He was. He'll come. All right, he'll join us. Oh, right there. You just come on time, Prof. Your chair is waiting for you up there. Prof is a senior economist. He was just recognized by the Deputy Minister as the advisor in the Ministry of Finance. He has been providing policy advice to countries, mainly in the African region, for the past 40 years. He is the author of several books which focus on the central role of institutions in economic development. And yes, as I've said, he's currently the advisor to the Ministry of Finance. And then finally, and I would like to invite you, Deputy Reserve Bank Governor, Dr. Innocent Mache. He is the immediate former Director of Training at the African Economic Research Consortium. Dr. Mache is in charge of the Economic Research and Policy Information Technology, FinTech, Human Resources and Administration divisions in the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. He has served on several boards, various public and private institutions across Africa, and brings a vast wealth of experience to the central bank. So a warm welcome, and as I see how we can grill them, please a round of welcome and acknowledge the panel. Thank you. So if I can start with you, can we have a mic, please, for our panelists? Oh, okay, thank you. Let me start with, I normally like to see more women on the panel, but unfortunately,
Means I go first.
I think I have to sit here. Yeah, actually. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, so welcome, Joe. Let me start with Joe. The report confirms the banking sector's exposure. Sorry, that's not your question. The CCDR suggests that climate change could reduce agriculture output by as much as 20% by 2050, with considerable variations across crop types. The report also proposes both public and private sector measures to build resilience. So from the British Embassy, from the UK, can you please just share in terms of your own experiences and how you think, we could actually be working on the interventions that need to be done?
Great, thanks so much, Fadzi, and I hope I can come under the Honourable Deputy Minister's all protocols observed for myself and the fellow panellists. I think it's fantastic the World Bank is releasing both these reports today. They're areas that the UK really cares about, and the UK has a very strong relationship with the World Bank and was actually the major contributor to the previous trust fund, ZIMREF, precisely to kind of help with this kind of analysis. So I'm really pleased to be here today. I think as the UK, we know that Zimbabwe has a really vibrant private sector, and it's really key to accelerating development, improving livelihoods, and transforming economies. But we also know that climate absolutely underpins the fundamental of the agricultural economy, which is the mainstay of Zimbabwe. When we try and link the two, which I think is your question, Zimbabwe has many advantages. I mean, you've talked to the skilled labour, the strong agricultural know-how, and in sectors like horticulture, cotton, meat and dairy, we've been highlighted as ones for growth. And as the UK, we have a partnership with the Horticultural Development Council, where we're helping HDC to support its members on things like green finance, green energy, access to investment, and inclusion of smallholder farmers, because I think that's really key, how to involve the smallest people. But I'll also come back to what the Deputy Minister talked to, which was from FUDZA, which is the kind of conservation agriculture. And I think that brings together civil society with the public sector. And so we're going to be supporting them to bring the Fumfudza Foundation for Farming and train the Agritech's public sector extension agents. I think that's a really nice partnership. I think we agree with those growth areas around tourism, financial services, critical minerals. I think that's all really good. And I'm really pleased to say our embassy down the road is now fully on the grid and actually supplying back into the grid. So if people in Mount Pleasant and Arundel are getting a little more power, then we're certainly seeing the benefits of that. I think one thing I would like to talk about is the barriers. You've talked about macroeconomic stability, and we think that's absolutely right. When British investors come here, that they have a level of concern. We know once we get them here, that risk-reward shifts. But what's really, really important is to be able to think for them, how are they getting their money in, and then how do they get it out, and at what rate? So I think that's really critical. One thing I want to say, and you mentioned it about women, is there a way that we can link these two reports, which is something that we haven't talked about today? And I think there may be an opportunity here if we put women at the centre of the private sector and women at the centre of climate. Because when we look at Zimbabwe, we know how climate vulnerable it is. We know that most agricultural work is done by women. We know that women are underrepresented in the green industries around infrastructure and energy. We also know that women are underrepresented in the private sector. And when they're there, I think the most recent Labour report says they're paid about 2/3 the same as their male counterparts. So I wonder, as much as we look at barriers, is there a real opportunity, and I'm looking to Dr. Kwakwa here, to say, can we put women and gender into all of our thinking about private sector and climate? And when we move forward from these reports into action, from analysis to action, whether women can be at the part of it. So let me finish by just saying that we really, really support all of this work. Access to finance affects the whole economy, right? And while this is partly about the kind of sovereign debt arrears, there are ways to unlock other forms of finance. We've been able to do that here, working with 3 private banks, able to support small, medium enterprises around agriculture. Introduction of the bankable leases, the 99-year leases, could really unlock the finance that we know is really important. So arrears clearance is at the heart of it. The UK is really supportive of all of that. We're really actively engaged on the structured dialogue, and we hope we can get to a really good place on that structured clearance. But what I would say is let's put women at the heart of our climate and private sector work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. I just had one
And if I do slip away, I will say it's only because the Ministry of Health has called Development Partners this morning at 10. It's not lack of interest. My colleagues are in the room. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Joanne. And yes, the only thing I heard about was women. So thank you. Let me move to Bongai. The report identifies several cross-cutting and sector-specific constraints affecting the private sector's ability to fully realize its potential, and that has been really clear. From the private sector perspective, what would be the 2-3 key priorities?
Not 6.
3, 2 or 3. The others we can talk outside. But that are critical to remove some of these constraints to facilitate private sector investments.
Great, thanks, Fuzzy. And thank you everyone who's here. Thank you to the World Bank, IFC as well. It's great to be here representing the private sector. As my fellow old Georgian would know, that protocol is important, and so I don't chair Old Mutual Group, I just chair one of the divisions, so that's insurance company. I must clarify that, otherwise, I might be misquoted and get in trouble. So the first thing, and I have to temper my remarks to say that I think everything must be contextualized. So we've got to have an understanding of the broader context, that some efforts or some comments might come across slightly as criticism, but I'm a big believer that for us to identify issues and problems and for us to move forward, we have to have proper dialogue. We have to identify what the issues are, and we have to make sure that we have a deep understanding of them. And representing the private sector, and it's funny that we are local, and the first thing we think about is currency. They'll be thinking about how to move their investments in and out of a country, and they think about the volatility of currency, etc. We're just thinking about currency from a day-to-day basis, how we transact, how we save, how we continue to develop our businesses and invest in the future. So if you look at key issues in currency, my biggest bugbear is SI 118A of 2020. We've talked about that. We'll talk about it repeatedly. Until we have an understanding that we aren't in a position for a rate to be dictated to us, then we will not move forward, right? And we look at the issues, particularly around the 10% margin. That is a significant issue. We've had the MPC making a recommendation that the 10% margin has to be removed. And we look forward to the MPS, Deputy Minister. I hope you've had your input into that as well. And John too comes in. We look forward to having things like that, those barriers being removed. The other issue, particularly around currency, is when we look at the issues in and around the auction, right? It's a direct relation to that. We've got a subsidy of local businesses, and as much as I represent the private sector, we also must realize that we're penalizing the private sector as well. You know, Zimplats is going to declare, if they haven't already, a loss for the first time in many, many years. And people will look at it and think that it's all got to do with the platinum prices. Yes, platinum prices are an issue in and around what they have fallen to, commodity prices, but effectively they have a tax on revenue that has been made because of the surrender requirements, which is at 30%. And, you know, the mathematicians in the room might be able to work it out, but it probably works out to be about 5% of your revenue as being a tax. That's a material issue. It speaks to the margin that they're able to generate as a business. And you look at Zimplats. Zimplats, phenomenal business. You know, they targeted a $1.8 billion investment in Zimbabwe, 10,000 new jobs, etc. So we need to understand that we're penalizing business in that space. So we need to have issues in and around that being addressed. And I think the third one around currency is just to say we don't have a forex problem. What we do is we have a pricing and an allocation problem. And until we address the issues around pricing and allocation, then we won't be going anywhere and we won't be moving forward. You know, people keep talking about, you know, our trade balances, etc. But it's a red herring. You know, there's countries that are much bigger than us, have significantly less FX generated than us, but they don't have the day-to-day problems and headaches that we have. So until we address those issues in and around currency, I don't think we're going to particularly find ourselves in a very good space. The next thing is consistency, all right? And when we look at consistency, we look at consistency of environment, right? And when I talk about consistency, you know, we joke and we say that Zimbabwe has more statutory instruments than there are days in a year, all right? When an investor, domestic or foreign, puts their capital at risk, what they want and what they seek is not certainty, because certainty doesn't exist, all right? I'm an investor. I put capital at risk. What I want is consistency. I want a consistent environment where I know that if I put my money in and I invest it today, this is what I understand the environment to be from a framework, governance, legal, economic, monetary policy, etc., even from labor as well. I need to understand what that environment is going to be, and when the environment changes, it makes a significant impact. You know, we say in Zimbabwe the only consistent thing is change, right? Except change in the supermarkets, because we know we don't get that. Then the next thing I'm going to talk about is climate. You know, not necessarily the climate that Dominic focuses on, and we've talked about climate change, but just the climate in Zimbabwe. So we look at the report that was done. We look at certain things around tourism, and you know, tourism and hospitality is something very close to my heart. It's an industry I'm very actively involved in. Victoria Falls, we have an absolutely fantastic airport. You know, it is a great hub, and I'm a strong believer that Vic Falls Airport is actually going to be bigger than Harare International eventually. You know, it's a $1 billion city. It's grown in the last decade plus from a small little town of 4,000 people to a thriving mini metropolis of 40,000 people, but it's got bad infrastructure, right? We've got insufficient sewage. We've got insufficient water. We don't have the necessary hospital. So that's a potentially $2 billion town, right? But it doesn't have the infrastructure. When you are in Victoria Falls, how do you get to Hwange, right? Have you driven on the roads recently? Yes, and I know the challenges that government has with regards to financing roads, etc. But for us to actually have a proper integrated tourism sector, we need to have accessibility. And right now we've got very poor accessibility. You know, we've got increased airlines that are flying through, and you could fly to Hwange, and limited transport to Kariba. But until we address the issue on infrastructure, then we will not be moving forward, because we need to have roads that work. We need a rail system. Grown from 0 to nearly 8% lithium in terms of world production. How do we move that lithium out? We must have rail, right? Rail is the cheapest and the best way of being able to move things around. Climate, you talk about renewables. What is our policy with regards to renewables? That's the investment climate that we talk about. What is our policy? You know, we aren't getting the concessions that we should be getting in and around the importation of your photovoltaic cells. We're not getting that in terms of the batteries, in terms of the inverters, etc. Do we have a policy that is actively encouraging that? We talk about the IPPs, but we've got issues around tariff. You know, a lot of people are looking and saying, why should you be feeding into ZPC when you've got a nonsense tariff? So actually the new way I see is a lot of people will be developing independent power production, but with off-take agreements rather than fitting into the national grid.
I think I'm going to take my chairmanship.
Can I just say one more thing?
My chairwomanship?
Sorry, I know, I talk a lot. So not to be bad, so let's talk about, I'll just give you two good things we've done well in climate.
You know what I'm going to do?
Yes.
I'll come back to you.
Okay.
I'll come back to you, so that I think you've already given us a lot of fodder, and we really need to unbundle all that. So can I come back to you without
Not a problem, ma'am.
any disrespect?
You are in charge.
Thank you. All right, thanks. So thank you very much, Bongai, and really apologies for giving you a title that you don't have, but you will soon have. But thank you so much. Let me now turn to Prof. Ashok. I'll start with you. I would like to end with the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor. So let me start with you. And yeah. So for you, the report underscores the critical importance of further strengthening macroeconomic stability, including market-driven exchange rate, as a precondition for unlocking the potential for Zimbabwe's private sector. What is the key reform agenda of the government in the short to medium term to address these concerns? I think this is very easy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. We could spend the whole day discussing these issues, but I'll try to limit it to a few minutes. So I think the Honorable Deputy Minister has more or less covered the issues. So I will just expand on some of the items that he has talked about. So there are just three areas in terms of macroeconomic stability, which are the focus of what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years. The first is the fiscal side, which the Honorable Deputy Minister referred to, and I won't go into it because for the last few years we have been very disciplined, and unlike what was happening, say, 10 years ago, where we had fiscal deficits of up to 15% of GDP, we have now limited it to 1.5 to 2%. So we're very strict about it. So the fiscal area is under control, and I don't think we need to dwell on that anymore. We are keeping with the SADC targets, and we are indeed have zero borrowings from the central bank. So there's nothing more to be said on the fiscal side. That is the policy of the government and our ministry, and will continue to be the case going forward. On the monetary side, it's more complex. It's related to the exchange rate. But very simply, on the monetary side, the primary problem was increasing liquidity, which was coming into the system, and the whole issue of the QFOs and the liquidity created by the quasi-fiscal activities has been under discussion for several years. I think we've come to the point now of concluding that matter. We've had a very good Article 4 mission with the IMF, and we have known about this for a while. So thank you very much, IMF, but we were aware of these issues. But yes, it helps to have that analysis and stamp of approval from the fund. So the problem with it was it's not so much trying to find fault with the central bank. Indeed, that's not the case at all. It's a legacy issue. And the legacy was basically that the government had a lot of active debt, and the previous government, the borrowing that had been undertaken was not done by the central government, but it had been done through the central bank. And the central bank indeed was given the responsibility of servicing those liabilities. And that's the primary reason why this was happening. So this was identified, and 6 months ago, His Excellency the President, along with all the advisors and our ministry, that function was taken over by the Ministry of Finance. So all the servicing of those liabilities was moved from the central bank to where it should be, which is the Ministry of Finance or the Treasury of any country. And no, those liabilities are now being all financed through the budget. As far as possible, we keep the deficit under control, so it will be financed in a non-inflationary manner. So that has been the primary reason for the increase in liquidity. So we believe that now that issue is also under control, and the central bank can then focus on its primary responsibilities rather than going into something which it inherited and which was a legacy issue. So I think on the monetary side, we are also coming to closure with this problem which has bedeviled the economy for a long time. And the third issue, very quickly, it's the longer story, is to do with the exchange rate. There again, you have to look at this in historical context. You can't suddenly pull this out of the sky. We had episode of hyperinflation, and that destroyed the trust and confidence in the national currency. We, in fact, lost the national currency in 2009 and fully dollarized. So the question is, from dollarization, how do we go back to a normal situation where we have a national currency? And it's not easy, because once confidence and trust, after all, these are all fiat currencies. So once that is destroyed, it's not an easy process. But I think we have tried various options. We've now, as a transitional measure, adopted the dual currency system, whereby at least that gives certain certainty to the market, and the dual currency is going to be maintained till 2030. And now various options are being considered as to how we can stabilize the currency. Because you talked about inflation. So inflation in Zimbabwe, as my colleagues from the University of Zimbabwe who've done very good work on this and have econometrically shown that there's a one-to-one relationship between the exchange rate and inflation. So we are not going to solve the inflation problem unless we solve the exchange rate problem. It's quite straightforward. So exchange rate, how do we sort that out? That again we are receiving, we've thought about it a lot. We've done our own analysis. We have received a lot of support from the fund. And indeed, we are hoping that there is a matter of urgency. So we hope indeed that the bank also will support us in this process, because it's not just an exchange rate issue. It's to do with inflation and the macroeconomic stability. So it's a broader issue than just that. So as being the two IFIs who support us, we hope that you will support us. It's a matter of urgency now. We're looking forward to a monetary policy statement in the next month or couple of months, which hopefully will have all the measures which will put in place what is required in terms of exchange rate stability. And so we, as I said, we are looking at various proposals, various options, and we hope that we have the support of the fund and yourselves at the World Bank to be able to come out with a solution which will put this third and most large, this is the largest elephant in the room, to rest very quickly.
Let's put this elephant to rest. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Ashok. Thank you very, very much. Let me move to the last, because I'm really looking at the time, because I would like to engage the people that have come here as well.
Sorry, just one thing I'd just like to mention very quickly, because I made a promise to my brother, the PS of Industry, sitting over here. So in terms of the CPSD, we have absorbed most of the ideas in the CPSD already, since we have had a look at advanced copies. We have also done our own analysis between a think tank here called Zeparu and ourselves in the Ministry of Finance. And indeed, the Central Bank's Economic Research Unit has also done very good work on revealed comparative advantage. So all this has already been absorbed, and now we have started a process of putting in place a brand new Zimbabwe National Industrial Development Policy, which is forward-looking and which is based on all these ideas. So maybe my PS would like to make a comment later, but that's the way we are going, and it's already part of the policy which has been approved by Cabinet. So it's up to us to implement it with your support. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And I had promised that I would recognize people as they come in. Welcome, PS Dr. Tom Ushe, PS for Industry. Thank you and welcome. So let me move to our last panelist, Dr. Mache from the Reserve Bank. The report confirms the banking sector's exposure to climate risks in Zimbabwe, particularly increased credit risks due to the country's vulnerability to agricultural drought. The report also suggests expanding climate-related index insurance for agriculture. Do you think this is a priority? And what other measures do you think are high priority to lower the banking sector's exposure to climate change? And I'll ask you to do this as an elevator pitch so that we really understand in the shortest terms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fadzi. And I want to begin by thanking the colleagues from the World Bank and from the fund and from IFC. But all protocols observed. Deputy Minister, Permanent Secretaries, Ambassador, thank you for coming to the launch. I would say yes. Basically, the banking sector in Zimbabwe is invariably exposed to climate-related risks, notably physical risks. And I think our colleagues really emphasized that. The transition risk may become pronounced as decarbonization initiatives gather momentum. The level of climate-related risks, however, cannot be easily quantified currently due to the absence of reliable and appropriate data. Indeed, addressing these climate risks in the financial sector is a matter of priority. I want to emphasize that the Zimbabwean financial sector is stable, it's resilient, and to our partners, they should know the dollar that goes into our financial sector will come out as a dollar. Okay. Climate change is complex, and developing appropriate measures and metrics is challenging. This requires time and careful consideration. In this regard, the bank has initiated efforts to develop a framework for climate change assessment encompassing market, credit, and liquidity risks. As a proactive measure, the bank issued a guideline on climate risk management in April 2023 for governance, risk management, control, internal control, stress testing, reporting, and monitoring. In this regard, the bank is also working closely with our local financial institutions to embed climate risks in their risk management frameworks. Currently, the bank is working on templates for data collection because the data that we need is pretty heavy and it's pretty complex. This will support the financial service sector's stability and sustainability. But to just give a broad brush to some of the issues that have been raised, and I think Honorable Deputy Minister and Professor here have covered a lot of the issues. But let me just say that these issues link to our transition, and we are in the process of 3 transitions. We're in the process of market transition, we're in the process of digital transformation, and we're in the process of climatic transformation, green financing, and decarbonization. Now, there are ways in which we could embed this to anchor not only current but future stability. And again, the sort of market-based and market-driven pricing mechanism that we all need, including for the exchange rate. Deputy Minister, let me invade your territory and prof a little bit. We have to understand that there is a balance that we have to strike between revenue generation, which is taxation and all that, and the other macroeconomic metrics that we use. The revenues that we need for infrastructure, for all sorts of other issues, will have to be generated internally. Why? Because Zimbabwe has no access to foreign funds. So even as we adjust, even as we transform into a market-based economy, and we are well on our way to doing that, the message to our partners is, if we hold hands, we're going to make it. It will take us a much shorter time period, and it will benefit the broader economy and the broader society. If we don't, it will take us much longer. It will be a protracted process. So this is an invitation to our partners. Come on board. As the reports mention quite clearly, the potential is huge. Our private sector is resilient. We need partners to partner with to take it that step further. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. That's why we love working with the Reserve Bank. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we've come to the end of our panelists, and thank you very much. Can we give them another round of applause? I would now like at this stage to open it up, but I would like to open it up to at least 2 questions, 2 important, pointed questions, right, to the panelists, and then we can see if we still have time for more. But for now, let me indulge the Deputy Minister with your first question. I see you will have to identify yourself and also state who you are.
I think you can have 2 questions because mine is a comment to my fellow old Georgian here. And it's to echo the Deputy Governor's sentiment. He represents a constituency that is going to be key in the next few months, which is the private sector. Would like to remove the notion that maybe government is in denialism, that distortions in the market don't affect us. Probably afflicts government much more. You know, you're collecting at a very low base, and then you're paying for services at a higher base. So this is something that has been acknowledged, dissected, studied, and as we go into somewhat of a transition over the next few weeks or next few months, I think it's going to be very important for the private sector to come together with government. We are sitting together on the same side of this issue. There is no government on one side and private sector on the other side, and developmental partners in the middle trying to get people together. I think as Zimbabweans, we're all sitting on the same side of this issue that is afflicting all of us. So there have been consultations, there will be. Of course, they can't be preemptive lest you have too much speculation within the market. But we acknowledge and realize that the private sector is going to be one of the most key and important pillars in the success of any programs that might be coming up. So I just thought it was worth mentioning, and a rallying call to the private sector to participate and join hands with government as we move on. So I think that's just a comment, not a question, comment. Thank you.
So much for that. I think it was good that you said it at the time you said it. All right, thank you. Let me move to our next question. Please identify yourself and just make your question as succinct as you can. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So My name is Chiad Zaheri. I am founder of Ubuntu Alliance, a company increasing access to information and data to farmers, but also collecting from farmers, and vice chair of the Zimbabwe Carbon Association. So I wanted to address ask a question to say, how is Zimbabwe positioning itself to access alternative funding? So right now we've got the EU has launched the Sustainable Finance Reporting Directive, and one of the biggest challenges for emerging markets is impact risk due to poor integrity of data, or as the Deputy Ambassador Joe Abbott highlighted, that women are being paid 2/3 less on average than men doing exactly the same job. That adds an added level of impact risk. So is there a way the World Bank and perhaps the Reserve Bank can work together to close that so we can access alternative financing? And to let you know, in 2021, Kenya mobilized 1.8 billion in impact funding for startups. Uganda, 222 with lower liquidity. Zimbabwe, 2 million, but we need to be a bit more aggressive within that space.
Okay, thank you so much for that question, and I'll try to see who can attempt to answer that question. Since the first question was a comment from the minister, we can allow for at least another question. And here I would like to direct, if you have any specific questions to the presenters, it would really be an opportunity to also ask at this point. So not just the panelists, but the presenters. Oh, thank you so much. Please identify yourself, Doc, and yeah. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Reneth Mano from the Livestock and Meat Advisory Council. I look forward to reading the two reports and studying them in detail. But I have a very quick question to both the team that did the analysis and also to the government representatives here. We're in the middle of an El Nino-induced drought that is affecting our domestic agriculture, livestock sector, and undermining the prospects probably for realizing these opportunities. I look back at the 2024 budget and I worry, and this is my question to both monetary and fiscal authorities. Do we have enough provisioning to cover the very big risk that is going to be affecting the domestic agricultural bank financing of agriculture, as well as the self-financed farmers who are going to lose 40-60% of their expected output? This is a huge shock to the market. We have acknowledged it, and we knew it was coming. And just to acknowledge once again that this study by World Bank is a follow-up to many other studies. I think I remember Dina Ariel, 2004 study, which we were part of. So we knew this risk was coming. Now it's big. And this year it's even bigger. How far should we be worried about the extent of lack of provisioning, perhaps at fiscal level, and the monetary implications of the defaults that are going to affect our financial sector, and indeed the kind of support that our 70% of our population might need in terms of food aid and assistance from our government, if not from our partners? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I would like to share the questions, the two questions, between World Bank and the Reserve Bank Governor. And Nathan, if you would like to come in from the bank side, you will come in at the end. Okay, fine. I suppose you put it in your remarks. So if you would like to first start by answering, and I'm looking at Dominic, if you would like to come in on any of what has been stated. So let's start with Dominic and then the Governor.
Reneth, nice to see you. And yeah, I think this is absolutely what it's about. It's about risk management. And I think what we have to do is we have to think really broadly about risk management, not just about financial, but irrigation is a form of risk management. Breeding, plant breeding, livestock breeding are all forms of risk management. And I think that's what we need to inculcate with the help of people like the innocent from the Reserve Bank, is really looking into these ideas very broadly, because that is what will bring resilience and adaptation to Zimbabwe going forward.
Thank you. I'm not sure I will do justice, but just to agree that Zimbabwe needs to be a little bit more aggressive around the issues that you raise, particularly because there are ways in which we could deal with the transition in a way that takes into account the structure of our economy, the way in which we produce, the way in which we trade, and the way in which we deal with socio-economic issues. By the way, all these things are interlinked, and I like the fact that the report brings up, to the fore the major issues that we need to concentrate on. We really need, partners that are dependable, reliable. We need patient capital. We need to be able to do the things that are essential, whilst we adjust to do the things that need to be done in order to transform our economy. One way we could think about this is some kind of, not blended finance, because it's a tricky area, and I think we need to do a lot more, but structures that look like blended finance. And if you look at the Kenyan example, that's what they tried to do. And it can succeed, it can fail, but it's worth trying. I hope.
I think that just to talk about, we talk about FDI, we talk about foreign portfolio investments, but the biggest investor is the local investor. Your local investor doesn't need to be convinced. So I think guaranteed we are the biggest stakeholders with government in all of these things, and we just want to be heard. And we also want a seat at the table because government's interests are our interests. So that's it, summarized.
I think we are on the same page. Deputy Minister, we are on the same page. Right. Okay, so thank you so much to the panelists for such a rich, engaging conversation with our audience. So a big round of applause once again as you come down and take your seats for the next session. Right. So for the next session, can I invite, thank you, can I invite you, Nathan? And I would like to invite Vasco. I can't see him anymore. Yes, please. You can't escape either the podium or the red seat. One, choose. Thank you.
I think I'll just stand in the interest of not keeping you too long. So let me, on behalf of the World Bank team and our country office here, really thank all of you for coming here today, starting first and foremost by the Honorable Deputy Minister. I think your commitment to advancing these issues is really impressive. Honorable Deputy Minister, since we've started engaging with you since your appointment, you've been a strong champion and voice on moving us, your partners, in the direction of supporting your country. We have seen a seriousness on the part of the government to take forward the bold, difficult actions, reforms that you need to. So I just want to thank you for your commitment and support to this process. Of course, we are very excited to have our Vice President here. We know it's been a long time since we've had a Vice President come to Zimbabwe. And just to let you know, she appointed me to this job, and one of the things that she said to me when she appointed me was, "I want to go to Zimbabwe." So she's been on my back since I've been in this job, which is, I'm embarrassed to say, 1.5 years to get her here, but we finally got her here. And but thank you, Victoria, as well, for being a champion of Zimbabwe in Washington, but also beyond Washington with all our partners. She has followed the situation very closely, the structured dialogue very closely, and has committed to support you as well. I would like to thank our teams that worked on the CPSD and the CCDR for the way in which you engaged the various authorities and partners on the ground here. It's a data-driven set of documents. We hope the government and everyone else would use these to advance the important public policy measures that need to be taken, but also the various specific actions. I think we've heard some fantastic things by our panelists. A couple of things that I just want to highlight that I thought were really, really important was, obviously, I think the Deputy Ambassador Joe mentioned the point on women. I think that maybe it didn't come out clear enough in these presentations, but I think it's, I just want to reassure you that there's no development that's going to happen without putting women at the heart of it, be it in private sector, be it in climate, be it in everything. So for us, we take this very, very seriously. And I say that not because my boss is sitting right here, but also because it's a core part of everything that we do. I think Bonga, you made a really important point on the point of consistency. Others would call it predictability. I think the enabling environment has to be there to support you all, and I think that we'll continue to work with you on this. I would like to thank the professor for his eloquence, as always. It's a pleasure to work with the Ministry of Finance on these technical issues. We appreciate the fact that you give us an opportunity to work with you in the Ministry of Finance at the technical level that we exchange. I was really happy to hear from the feedback from the recent IMF mission on the level of technical discussions and debates that were had, and the willingness of finance and the authorities, including the central bank, on providing the support and engaging. I think this is just another signal from your side on your commitment to make sure that public policy is made on the basis of data and evidence. And I want to thank you for that. I think the deputy governor said it well when he said partners come on board. I don't know where oh, he's right here. And I think that's absolutely right. And I just want to say, in this structured dialogue platform, I think it's really, really important that we all sit at the table, we all work through together and meet the milestones and work towards the milestones. I know sometimes it's really, really hard, but we have to do it together. We are committed from the World Bank's perspective. I think the Honorable Deputy Minister knows we're putting forward our new country engagement note, which is the first formal sort of strategy document that we're preparing in a while as a sign of our commitment. I think our IMF friends, with the visit of the Africa Director recently and moving forward on their program, is another indication from the IFIs of a strong commitment. Obviously, it goes without saying that our AFDB friends leading on this structured dialogue platform shows that the IFIs are squarely behind you. I think you see the other development partners, bilaterals there as well. So we remain committed to work forward with you. Lastly, I just want to say that the private sector is the engine of growth. I think we all really, there's no country in the world that has grown on the backs of the public sector. It's a private sector. So we have to all work together to create that inducive, enabling environment to enable them to grow. And I think the Deputy Minister said it well at the end. He said, this is not us, you. This is all of us working together, right? Everyone, it's not us working in our different corners. And I think I just want to end on that note, Honorable Deputy Minister, that you made. We're all in this together. We're all holding hands together, and it's important that we continue to work together through good and bad times. So thanks so much for all of you for coming.
Thank you so much, Nathan. And then finally, let me call upon Vasco Nunes, who is the IFC acting country manager, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So, thank you. And thanks for your beautiful moderation. Maybe we can start by thanking you for your very witty and fun moderation. So nice to see you all. I'm acting country manager for Mozambique and Zimbabwe, so I sit next door in Maputo, and this is not just another CPSD. We have done a lot. We have done 24, right, Volker? And although there is a lot of macro conditions and we really need to wait to operate, the private sector diagnostic gives us a bit of butterflies to us as IFC, because it's front and center, the diagnostic and on the CCDR.